fairies, there's something inherently creepy about them, I think. But the last ferry out was also inspired by my real experiences, which I set on a fictional island. Isla Colel doesn't actually exist, so I sort of created it to suit my purposes. But in my case, I happened to spend the month of February 2020, really great timing, didn't know it at the time. I spent the month of February traveling around Mexico by myself. And at the time, I was doing some travel writing. So it was partly for fun, partly for some different articles that I had pitched and that I was going to write. And I sort of made my way through a bunch of different cities and I was by myself. And so when I'm traveling alone, I love just, chatting with people everywhere I go. And I don't speak Spanish or very much. And so I was sort of finding these English speaking expats everywhere I went. And they were all so friendly and so welcoming and so sort of eager to invite me into their kind of, community of expats in these different towns. And I was fascinated by these communities because they were super motley crews. There was, old people and young people and couples and families, and they were from all over the world. And they were really close and protective, and they spent a lot of time together, but they didn't really seem to have anything in common beyond speaking English. I mean, I thought if these people all lived in an English-speaking country, I really don't think they would be friends. And the other thing I found fascinating was that these expats didn't have a ton of interest in, what do you do for a living? Tell me about your background. What's your home, your home like? Um, they talked very little about their own pasts too, just sort of beyond the generalities. And were very focused on as if their life began when they started traveling or when they parachuted out of their lives. And I couldn't help thinking, like, wow, these are people who are either running from something or seeking something, right? There's something going on with all of these people that they just kind of fled the lives they were born into and their families and everything they'd ever known. And I've never been an expat myself. My partner has. Um, but I'm jealous of expats and yet sort of judgmental of them. But then it's like, why am I being judgmental? I actually think like our capitalist rat race is a mess. So isn't it great that they're stepping out of it? But wait, that's not fair. I just realized once again, I had complicated feelings around it. And as you sort of queued up by asking about my other books, I love taking these complicated, close-knit, closed-door social worlds and throwing a dead body into the center. So that was where the idea for The Last Ferry Out began. I get to know my characters by being with them on the page, and it feels like I'm meeting someone new. So at the beginning, they're sort of like a paper doll. Like they're sort of moving around, and maybe I have a few of their big major values or major characteristics in mind. I mean, in the case of Abby, she's the one who's mourning her partner Esther, who died on this island a few months earlier, and she decides to go there to sort of get closure in an active way. And I knew that I wanted the book to kind of explore grind culture and some of that stuff I was feeling about these expats of, is it good or bad that they're all kind of just chilling? And what about, my grandparents and my mom are immigrants, and that's very different from being called an expat, and they were very hardworking. And so I decided to start with this character whose sort of major quality was that she is super focused on succeeding in sort of a traditional capitalist sense and being, super productive, super hardworking, super ambitious, being, the best in her class, the best in her field, all those things. And I realized that kind of applied to the steps she was taking to go to this island and try to get closure because mourning is sort of being in a state of grief kind of slows you down, right? It sort of prevents you from being that like most ambitious part of yourself. And if she's somebody who's kind of addicted to doing, it seemed very reasonable to me that she would, okay, I'm going to do something by going there and then I'll be better. Then I will have, dealt with my grief and I will have properly done my mourning and then I can move on. So yeah, I started with sort of nothing but that and got to understand her background, her family, her friends, what her relationship with Esther was really like. And this another kind of interesting thing is that this book has a bit of a puzzle box structure. It has obviously Abby's main kind of storyline that we're on too. But as I was writing, I realized I needed to introduce these other elements like, oh, we need to see Abby and Esther together. So I introduced these flashbacks of, kind of the showing their relationship and showing these pivotal moments. And then I realized we really need to see Esther on this island and we really need to see Esther interacting with these expats. And so then I started writing from her perspective too. And I just ended up with this sort of hodgepodge of pieces that luckily I was able, after I'd written them all and had them splayed around me, to kind of put into an order that hopefully is satisfying and not confusing for a reader to use to sort of unlock what really happened. I knew I wanted the island to feel like a character. I really always love like setting as a character, as we say. I know it's a cliche, but I wanted the island to feel real, and I wanted the community of the island to feel varied and real and interesting, and for there to be locals and expats, and for people to all have their different sort of perspectives on the island and how it should be and how it should be run. And yeah, so for me, I can't help but sort of map out whatever my setting is. I mean, I could draw you a map of the mansion in the spare room. I could do the same with the Calhoun Lofts warehouse that, warehouse turned lofts that was in the last night. And so yeah, I sort of mentally mapped that out and then was moving my characters around it, and it really didn't change a lot. I knew I wanted a lot of it to be um, to sort of capture, I don't know, the wildness and wilderness and power of nature, and I wanted that to be sort of one of the forces that she's both enchanted by, but then also that is sort of a foe in a sense. That's also sort of one of the bad guys closing in. And so yeah, I had a lot of fun like trying to capture what it would really feel like for this tiny island in the middle of nowhere with deep trenches on the sides so that if you just go out a little bit in a boat, then there's 600 feet of water below you. What it would be like to be on there and to feel sort of trapped on there. I generally don't have the answer to who done it when I'm working on it, and I figure it out by the end. And sometimes it's a surprise to me, and then I'm going back and re-examining the red herrings and the clues and any interactions that she has with the person who's at fault. But when I'm writing a whodunit, I sort of am experiencing it, as a sleuth, the same way that my protagonist is, the way that my narrator is, who's trying to put the pieces together. And I do have, of course, that meta sense of I can kind of look down, from above with my authorial, view and see things that she can't. But I still, as an author, am cognizant of trying to keep a lot of different sort of suspects in the air, keeping balls in the air. And so I'm, as she's speaking to one character, I'm asking them as an author, and they're answering, like, why would you have done it? What would your motive be? Do you have means, motive, and opportunity? And I'm not doing my job as an author if the answer is not yes for a lot of them, right? We need a lot of suspects. And so I'm sort of keeping these different plates spinning and keeping these different possibilities open until the end. And at that point, we commit, and like the truth becomes the truth, and the other things become red herrings. And hopefully that keeps it surprising, but also satisfying for the reader.